The worlds of Dungeons and Dragons are filled with many wacky, wonderful, powerful, and downright deadly magical items. But none are more powerful than the artifact tier. These are what comes above legendary. In artifacts, we have things like the Sword of Kars and the Eye of Vecna. Of all those artifact tier items, only one has appeared across 3 different games I've been playing in, and it's not the Sword of Kars, it's not the Eye or Hand of Vecna, or the Wand of Orcus, or the Book of Vile Darkness. It's the Deck of Many Things. So in this video I want to address why I think that is, and also give you a new way to think about the Deck of Many Things as more of a story-driven item than just something you can throw into your game, and also show you some of the cards, or all of the cards in the deck, what they do, and how we can adjust some of them so they might be less game-breaking, as some might consider it, or just fit better into your game. So if you don't use XP, you use milestones, something that you can use to change some of the benefits and drawbacks they may have. This is also a chance for me to show off these beautiful cards that I got off Etsy. If you've seen Campaign 1 of Critical Role, you might have seen this same deck before. I'm sure most people clicking on this video already know what the Deck of Many Things is, but if you don't, here's a refresher. It's a magical item in Dungeons and Dragons that resembles a sort of tarot card-like feel, this sort of tarot deck. And when a player character draws a card from it, it takes on some sort of magical effect. It's got this perception of being random, and there's this idea that by drawing a card from the deck, anything could happen. And it's not entirely incorrect. A lot of things can happen. Very crazy things. You could be granted 3 wishes. You might suddenly level up, or get a magic item, or become a lord in a far-off kingdom. Or you might die. Or your soul could be imprisoned in an extra-dimensional sphere in a far-off realm. Or you could or your grandfather could decide he wants to kill you. Most of the cards, when you draw them, disappear from the deck, so eventually you will wear through most of it until I think there's 2 cards remaining, at which point they pretty much counter each other out and do nothing. And that's really it. Unlike the Eye and Hand of Vecna, or the Sword of Kars, or the Wand of Orcus, there's no story behind the Deck of Many Things that's given in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It has no text entry aside from a brief description of what it might look like, and then it just gets into it. There's no attunement, no beneficial or detrimental properties from having it on your person, other than you might feel tempted to draw some cards. Ooh. Which some people like. I think we all have at least one person in our D&D groups who immediately upon seeing this will draw the first 5 cards off the top just to see what happens. And I think this is why it shows up so much. Unlike the Sword of Kars or the Hand of Vecna, there's no story given behind this. You can just drop it into your game, and there's no expectation given. If I get the Sword of Kars, then I'm expecting that at some point I'm going to be slaying Vecna, or at least having my sword taste his blood. If I get the Book of Exalted Deeds, then I'm going to go and smite evil, politics and intrigue be damned. Most extremely powerful items carry with them a sort of expectation that they're going to be used in some grand cosmic way. But the Deck of Many Things just shows up. There it is. You loot the Dragon's Hoard and, oh, what's this? It's a deck of cards. Is it a deck of many things? Ooh, it's certainly a deck of some amount of things. So what if we want to use the Deck of Many Things, but have it tie into your world in some grander, bigger way? Have it connected to some sort of cosmic being like those powerful magical artifacts are? And for that, I'm going to rip off whatever show I'm enjoying right now, which is Loki. Don't worry, there'll be no spoilers for Loki in this video. Instead of being randomness and chaos, the Deck of Many Things were an artifact of supreme law and order. It's not by chance you stumbled across this in the Dragon's Hoard. It was planted there by fate. It's not your free will and the randomness and the shuffling of cards that decide whether you win wishes or death. It's already been decided by a force you can't comprehend. In the 5e adventure Out of the Abyss, there's a chapter with an object called the Maze Engine, which is a giant brass disc from Mechanus. A modern NPC in the adventure calls it an Orderer. Activating the engine is a really cool encounter where random stuff starts happening. It starts emitting fairground music. It starts flashing lights, spitting gems, making creatures invisible, disintegrating them. A possible outcome of it is that it will teleport all of the characters around it to the beginning of the adventure with all their equipment at their current level. If you want to talk about an item that's potentially game breaking, that's the peak of it, where it might restart your entire adventure right back to the beginning. And that got me thinking, what if this sort of random chaos and these random tables that the Maze Engine has you roll on were actually part of a supreme law that's deciding this is the way it should be, not the way it is? Maybe that's what order looks like to a being that can divine fate. So what if there's a faction like the TVA in Loki that is actively able to divine the entire timeline of the entire multiverse from start to finish and is actively tweaking at it to try and reach the final outcome that they want to see? Now, the Deck of Many Things is no longer just a randomness generator, it's being used to course correct events. So when your player draws a card that causes their death, it's because they're meant to have been killed already by the in this sacred timeline of events. If they receive a great amount of wealth, it's because they should be wealthy, but something has gone wrong. If they receive a magic item, it's one they should have or will need in the future, according to this timeline of events that must be mandated. I mean, come on, there's a card called The Fates. It's right there in the name. By keeping this in mind, we also leave the door open to solve any long-term random effects. If a player's alignment shifts, or they lose a bunch of wealth or magic items, there could be a place, like on Mechanus, where all of that is kept. The players could encounter agents or creatures from this place, and they might be able to track it down and learn about it, stage a dungeon crawl or a heist or a full-blown takeover of this entire organization. I think I just want to run a D&D Loki-themed game at this point. That's probably it. Toss in some evil variants of the players. That could be fun. It's the Paladin, but now he's a wood elf instead of a high elf. Truly, this is a vastly different creature. What if the Earth Genasi Cleric were a Fire Genasi Cleric? My word, it's the Ranger, but he's the Alligator! And his Beastmaster companion is a human! So with this in mind, let's take a look at some of the cards in the deck and what they might do. Now, props are not mandatory for running the Deck of Many Things, but I would recommend having something for them to draw out of and shuffle. It creates like a bit more of a hands-on experience. You could use playing cards, and the DMG has like a little table that says like, you know, assign the ace of spades to the skull, the two of whatever to such and such card. And that works fine, but ideally, it doesn't even have to be like a branded Deck of Many Things, but like a tarot deck would be really cool because at least you've got like pictures and names that have a bit more gravitas to them. I think drawing the Void has a lot more impact for a player picking up this card than, yes, the King of Clubs. What's it do, DM? Let's start with balance. Your alignment flips. This can be seen as kind of killing your character. In a sense, it can. For someone going from lawful good to chaotic evil very suddenly, it can be quite a jump. But I think it can be a fun and adventurous jump for a player to kind of explore what can my character be when they're completely swapped around. Have your dark character arc. And then at some point, have a quest out there for the player to try and fix them and get them right back on track. Uriel, this Medusa-like visage curses you. You take a permanent -2 penalty to all of your saving throws. It hurts, and it's one of the bad cards in the deck. It's not the end of the world to have a penalty, and you can actually undo this card specifically by drawing the Fates card and choosing not to draw this as your use of it. Or you could probably have a quest to undo this, perhaps have them try and win a blessing from the god of fate, and I think that can be a fun adventure to try and do. The Jester. You gain 10,000 XP. Or you can choose to draw 2 cards instead. I would probably drop that from this just because there's no limit on how many times you can choose to just draw a card off the top of the deck. So there's nothing really saying, hey, I should choose to get 2 more, I might get lucky. 10,000 XP isn't really a big boost. I would probably consider dropping the Deck of Many Things around level 10-ish. So by that point, it's not even worth a full level up, but it is a pretty hefty boost. If you're playing a game without experience, say you're using milestone XP or you're trying to keep everyone at the same experience level, I'd consider giving the player maybe a feat instead. The Fool. You lose 10,000 experience points and draw one additional card beyond your declared draws. It's not great. You don't want to lose XP, but also it's not too bad, considering that if you recently leveled up, you might only lose like a couple of hundred XP, and that's not the worst. It won't drop you to below that level, so it caps out. Once again, if you're running a game that has no experience points, then I would probably make this similar to the Uriel card, and maybe have the player take a -1 or a -2 penalty to their attack rolls and ability checks, as they're sort of cursed with bad luck and clumsiness. Once again, can be cured the same ways with some sort of quest. Gem, you're showered in gemstones, you're rich. Nothing but upside. The Fates. Reality's fabric unwinds, and you can undo an event as if it never happened. Fantastic card, and I think kind of the purpose of the deck with the context we're going with here. In this case, the player gets to choose an event that has happened, perhaps anywhere in their lives, that they can undo and completely resolve. The Fates allow the character to alter reality as they see fit. If you wanted to nerf this card, you could do something like make it only work in the last 6 seconds, like the Thingamawhack from Galaxy Quest, but I would consider making this just work for anything and consider it like a wish, where you want to talk to your players about not undoing the campaign or the fun you're having, but still use it in some sort of clever and crafty way. You could undo a lot with this. You could undo one of the player or NPC deaths, you could undo the act of picking up the deck of many things, or you could scrub clean the time in Bard College you called the teacher mum. The Knight. I love this card. You get a 4th level fighter companion who joins you loyally until death. Fantastic, what's to lose? If you're DMing and you happen to be running low on time, you can always use the Knight stat block instead of actually going through the work of running up a 4th level character. But that could be a fun experience to try and come up with the sort of personality traits and ideals of this new NPC that is fiercely loyal and devout to one of your players. Key. A rare or rarer magic item that the player is proficient with appears in their hand. Fantastic, who doesn't just love a flame tongue appearing out of nowhere? Awesome use of a card. If the player who drew this is a spellcaster, I would consider instead of it being a +1 weapon, like, oh no, you just got a +2 dagger, how fantastic. Instead, maybe like an arcane focus, like a Rod of the Pact Keeper, or one of those cool spellbooks in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Talons. Every magic item you're wearing or carrying is disintegrated. It sucks. I hate it. If you're going to draw any card, this is one of the worst ones for a player, depending on the campaign, I suppose. If you're running a really low magic setting with very few magic items, or the player has no magic items or they're low level, then this might not even do anything. But in my games, I tend to throw a lot of magic items at the party by the time they're around sort of 10th level where I would consider running the deck. And by that point, man, this would kill so much fun. Like, months of work down the drain for that player. So in that case, I would consider perhaps not obliterating their magic items permanently, but instead have them taken away temporarily. Perhaps a portal opens up and sucks the magic items away from the player, or they suddenly vanish into the ether. But they suddenly reappear somewhere else. They might be on this plane of Mechanus, in this facility owned by this not the TVA, and being kept under lock and key. Or maybe they're given over to the villain of your setting, and now the paladin has an even better reason to go kick that lich's ass, because now he's waving the sun sword back in your face. Rogue. An NPC of the DM's choice becomes hostile to the player character. Only a wish or divine intervention can undo that hostility. I suppose you could also kill them, that would work too. So I would consider making the NPC that turns against them someone with an ally of theirs that has political power, perhaps, or someone close to the party that they can't just solve by getting rid of them. Perhaps that wizard you've been working with this whole time now hates your guts and thinks you should stop using his teleportation circle, Caleb. Or maybe your grandfather really, really thinks it's time for you to move out and smothers you with a pillow. Flames. A powerful devil becomes your enemy. Fantastic. Congratulations, DM. If your player draws this card, then you've just got a story hook there, and a cool reason for them to travel into hell at some point. Start turning the local devil-worshipping cult against them, have it start corrupting their allies and turning factions against the party's interests, and eventually just keeps showing up to give them hassles. Devils don't die in D&D if you kill them on the material plane. You have to go into hell to make sure they die permanently. So I would consider using maybe a Rakshasa, or you just because that has the ability to disguise self and hide as a humanoid creature amongst crowds, and it also has the ability to plane shift between hell and the material plane, so it can keep coming and going as it pleases. You could also use a horned devil or an ice devil or a pit fiend if your party's a really high level or you want this to be a really difficult challenge for them to try and surmount. But if you keep making this a hassle, you'll know you've done a good job when the party decides to go into hell with the plane shift spell they just learned and kick its ass. The Moon. You get 1d3 wishes. Possibly the best card in the deck? As a Dungeon Master, I wouldn't do anything to this card. It's perfect. I might even give a player 3 wishes flat, because I'd hate for them to roll a 1, and it's kind of like pulling a genie in a bottle out of a deck of cards. That's fun. A lot of DMs tend to treat wishes like a sort of monkey's paw situation, and I don't entirely agree with that, and I think I should do a video on wishes in the future as well. I discourage you from having these particular wishes blow up in the character's face especially. This is supposed to be a good card, and this is a game. The Star. Increase one of your ability scores by 2 to a max of 24. Fantastic card. All upside, no downside. The Idiot. Permanently reduce your intelligence by 1d4 plus 1. It's a drop of 2 to 5 to your intelligence, so I hope the Wizard doesn't draw this, and I also hope the Barbarian with 6 intelligence doesn't draw this. That could be pretty bad. I might even consider making this like the inverse to the Star card, drop it by 1d4 plus 1, but maybe have the player choose which stat they want to decrease before they roll the dice and see how much it goes down. It could be fun for the player to pick their own destruction. Suddenly the rogue's muscles atrophy and wither into nothingness as their strength drops from a 10 to a 6. Or maybe the cleric's posture changes and they hunch down and lose all confidence as their charisma drops from 8 to 4. Throne. You gain proficiency and expertise in the persuasion skill. You also become the rightful ruler of a small keep somewhere in the world. It's filled with monsters, but it is yours. This is a cool potential story hook for you to get into wider issues in your game. It could be an introduction to your players playing the political game and start becoming lords of their own realm. And can be a quick and easy way for the party to get a little stronghold without spending a lot of gold. Trying to get parties to invest in real estate, in my experience, can sometimes be like trying to draw a great deal of blood from a very small stone. Ruin. All forms of wealth you carry or own are destroyed or lost in the way that impacts reality the least. So even your property, such as castles, taverns, anything you might possess, lordly titles, are gone. Losing all your gold isn't the end of the world, and you can always get more gold. That's in abundance in D&D, and if your party's nice, surely they'll help you get back on your feet with a bit of their own. The property, however, is a bit of a loss. If your party's running some sort of D&D game of Monopoly, then this is kind of like a hard restart for that player. If you are running your game with a sort of deck of many things as a TVA device, then perhaps on this realm of Mechanus, there's an entire wing that's dedicated to just items that have been taken by ruin. Vaults full of gold, property like buildings that previously had vanished, leaving behind nothing but blank, empty plots of land, are now stuck in like some sort of vault or miniaturized like all ships and bottles. Or maybe there's just a big demi-plane where they throw all of these buildings to be lost at the end of time. I love the art on this card specifically. Look at that. Vizier. You can mentally ask one question and receive a truthful answer, as well as the wisdom to apply that knowledge. I read someone complaining on a forum somewhere that this could be potentially game-breaking, but I just don't quite see how. All it does is really just give the player knowledge, and there's only one of these cards. It could be used to solve a puzzle, or solve someone's murder. It could be used to gain useful insight, like a villain's weakness, or the location of a villain's weakness, perhaps? I don't have a problem with that. It just gives players a hand in moving on to the next step of the adventure. Sure, you might tell the players where Vecna's phylactery is, but that doesn't give them the ability to suddenly have it in their hands. They're still going to have to fight for it. The Skull. You summon an avatar of death who looks like the Grim Reaper, and you have to fight it. If it kills you, then you're permanently dead. This is one of the few, permanent death effects I can think of in the game. It's actually the only one that comes to mind where you can't even be restored with a true resurrection. I have a fun story about this one. In a game I was in, my character was taking a break for a while, so I was playing as his brother. But during that time, my party got the Deck of Many Things and started just drawing through it like madmen, and eventually worked through most of the deck until there was only pretty much just this card remaining. I didn't draw it from it at all because I didn't want to make them lose. Just because I was playing this temporary character, I didn't want to take out one of the cool effects and then walk away from the party, or potentially take out a really majorly bad effect and have them robbed of that experience. When my original character reunited with the party, we all knew which card was remaining in that deck, so when they said, hey, pick a card, any card, you play along. And that's how I got into a gunfight with the Grim Reaper in the town square. The Avatar of Death is kinda spooky, it certainly looks it, but it's not super hard for a high-level character to beat reasonably. If you've just come off a rest, or you haven't really used any of your resources, you're not hit, then this thing will barely pose a challenge for you. Its AC is 20, so it can be pretty hard to hit in the first place, but it's only got half the hit points of the character that drew it, and you could probably burst it down pretty quick if you just keep hitting it. For a low-level character, you might struggle, and it does automatically hit every round. It doesn't need to roll to hit you. It only does 11 damage average per round, so it's not the end of the world. Provided you don't start drawing cards in the middle of a difficult encounter, you'll probably be okay. I probably wouldn't do anything to this card personally. It can be a pretty fun experience for a player to overcome the Avatar of Death, and if you die, well, what more fitting way for your character to meet the end than by death's hand? Comet. If you single-handedly defeat the next hostile monster or group of hostile monsters, you automatically get enough XP to level up. Otherwise, nothing happens. I personally have never seen anyone level up as a result of this card, and that's kind of lame, so let's try and fix that, shall we? It doesn't really define what is a hostile monster, and that can be a bit difficult. Can you create a hostile encounter by just getting into a bar fight or kicking an irate chicken? Largely this depends on your DM's use of combat encounters, so if they constantly plan out each encounter for the day, then to try and be a challenge for the players, then this will never be able to give you a level up because you're not going to beat an encounter single-handedly that's made for 4 to 5 players. If they roll for encounters, then who knows what might happen. You might end up with a really easy one and you just have to wrestle a couple of wolves on the road, or you might end up in a really difficult situation. You might charge into the next room of the dungeon trying to get a level up, and then just get eaten by a T-Rex because you said, no one interfere, I need my level up. So what I would probably consider doing is making this like the good version of the Skull. Instead of having death on the line, it's your use of resources with a benefit on the line. When you draw this card, it summons a group of monsters. I would either come up with a monster or a level of monsters, probably maybe a medium or hard encounter for one player of their level. Maybe just click onto Kobold Fight Club and come up with something that way for a quick, easy. Bonus points for using Modrons and Celestials. Players don't get to fight them too much, so maybe have them step out of clock-like portals and issue a challenge. If you defeat the group, then you'll gain the boon of Mechanus. If the character who draws this card is knocked to 0 hit points, or someone tries to interfere in the battle, the monsters all vanish the same way they came through these portals. If they win the challenge, then they gain a feat. I think feats are a nice benefit to give to a lot of these cards, just because a lot of classes, like spellcasters, don't get to take too many of them as they're using their ability score improvements, and there's always a really nice feat for a character to take that can be really fun. The Sun. You gain 50,000 experience points, and a wondrous item appears in your hand. This is possibly the best card in the game, and I didn't realize it while I was writing the script for this video. 50,000 is a lot of experience points. If you're at level 19 and just hit level 19, this will immediately bump you to level 20. If you're a level 1 with no experience points to your name, and you draw the Sun, you become a level 9 character. You become a seasoned adventurer just for picking this card up. If you're not running XP, then a feat doesn't really meet a potential 9-level boost, a massive boost of XP. So I would actually think of giving an epic boon for this. As you draw the Sun card, you receive some sort of wondrous item, and your eyes are light with the flames of the sun, all-seeing and all-divining. You have True Sight. Or perhaps immunity to fire, or God, just give something good, because this is a ridiculous card if you're not handling XP. You gotta give them something good for this bad boy. You disappear and become entombed in a state of suspended animation in an extra-dimensional sphere. You effectively die, leaving behind all your items. Now, there's 2 cards that do these kind of effects in this deck, and we're going to get to the other ones soon. But I would try to make this one the lesser of the 2 effects, especially based on how the cards appear. According to the card, you can't be found by divination magic, but a wish spell reveals your location. I might consider dropping that for this one specifically, unless the players have access to several wishes that they might want to use to try and undo it. It doesn't give any extra info on where this extra-dimensional sphere is, so I would consider making it specifically for this card somewhere nearby to the players, perhaps in the city they're in, or the next one over, or perhaps in a dungeon nearby that they've heard of, or maybe even given to the villain, and now that current villain or one of their lieutenants in your arc has this party member's soul in their hands, or has their body stuck in a state of suspended animation. I would talk to your player and let them know that this can be a very temporary thing, and let them roll up a temporary character whose goals are aligned and wants to reach that same location that soul is trapped in. That way you can resolve it and no harm, no foul. Contrast that with the Void. This card spells disaster. Your soul is drawn from its body and contained in an object of the DM's choice. One or more powerful beings guard the place. While your soul is trapped in this way, your body is incapacitated. A wish spell can't restore your soul, but the spell reveals the location of the object that holds it. You draw no more cards. Oh, what a shame. Oh, I'm out. I can't draw more cards. Oh, this is the worst card in the deck. This card should be the worst card in the deck. I mean, look at it. Especially in this deck here. It's the only one with like an awful black border, and it looks horrible. It's scary. Like your soul's being sucked into a black hole. This card spells disaster. So let's make it so. Void and Donjon are thought of as killing your character, and at low levels, definitely. But when you hit the point at which you've got 9th level spells, even this should be overcome with some sort of epic, awesome quest for the party to embark on. So let's plan that out a bit. If you've seen Critical Role's Search for Grog one-shot, that's kinda what I'm thinking. Drawing this card means the fates have decided that your soul is too dangerous to the sacred timeline to be left to roam free. It's been locked, far away, and under lock and key, guarded by a truly fearsome jailer. I would put this prison, unlike the donjon, as far out of reach as possible, preferably on another plane of existence, and guarded by one of the coolest monsters in the stat block, something that you normally wouldn't get to throw at your players, but you've always really thought of wanting to. For our example, I'm going to put the soul in a clockwork crystalline prison on Mechanus. We'll call it the Eternal Penitentiary, and its jailer, the Perpetual Warden, is a Marut, a construct of ultimate law and order of Mechanus. Alternatively, I would also use a Solar. It's very rarely I get to throw a Celestial at my party, and I'm always looking for an opportunity. There you go, if your players have drawn every card in the deck of many things, then they should be feeling well better off, or knocked down a peg, really rich, or broke as hell. But they're probably feeling pissed off enough to go into the next plane of existence and really cause some trouble. A high-level adventure involving the deck could culminate in the party going over to Mechanus and trying to deal with the organization that stole their property, their wealth, and their friend's soul. Then when they get there, they can try and track down the one who produced the deck, and find out how many other parties have been blessed and cursed by it. That's all. Send this video to your DM, and I'll see you all in a future video. What if the big bads running the show are actually alternate universe variants of the players? I think I just really want to run a Loki game. That's it. Bye. I have a campaign to plan.